Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felipe. I'm the CTO at the Relevance. And today I'd like to give an update on what we're doing within technology. In technology in 2024, we have two main objectives, ensuring the security and compliance of our services, and second, to keep costs within budget. And in my presentation today, I'll be covering those two objectives. Starting with security and how we're ensuring a stable internet. So why is there an increased relevance in security? One reason is the contractual value of IPv4 addresses and the fact that an unauthorized transfer can cause a significant financial harm to our members. And second, the potential large impact on network connectivity caused by an unauthorized access. Like, for example, a misconfiguration in RPKI can have a severe impact in the internet. On the 24th of April this year, we have published a security investigation report. I have added the link here in case you want to have a look. In a nutshell, we had leaked credentials early this year from our members that were published online, and that was not detected during our routine monitoring. Furthermore, there were brute force attempts executed against Relevance access accounts. So in total, there are passwords of 870 accounts that were identified in public data breaches. 104 of those were linked to LR accounts. Email addresses were changed for 270 accounts, and that was using a feature that's no longer available in Relevance Access, where one could change the email address of the account. And finally, there were 8 accounts that were possibly compromised through brute force attacks. So what we have done about this? Well, first of all, we reset the password for all accounts that were either exposed through a data breach or that suffered brute force attempts. We also closely monitored the resources for 104 accounts that were identified as vulnerable for any suspicious activity going on there. For the accounts with recently updated email addresses, we have reached out to the account holders and to confirm whether that change was legitimate. And finally, we checked that no unauthorized change had taken place for the accounts that suffered brute force attempts. We have also made improvements in our Relevance access. The most important one was the introduction of mandatory 2FA. That happened on the 27th of March this year. That required significant code changes following a replatform that we implemented last year. And I have talked about that in Relevance 6, so you might want to refer to my slides there. But in a nutshell, we have migrated the backend engine from Atlassian Crowd to Keycloak and replatformed the whole thing to run on a Kubernetes cluster. We have then moved the 2FA implementation code from our own custom implementation to the native Keycloak one, and then it was a matter of enabling mandatory 2FA directly in Keycloak. We're currently implementing support FIDO2 keys and other authentication methods, and I have also recently written a Labs article about it, so you want to refer to that. Now changing topics, ISAE 3000 compliance and our ensuring trust and RPKI. I'm pretty sure that most of the room knows this, but RPKI, the Relevance is one of the 5 trust anchors for RPKI, and we issue certificates to resource holders, and that's a key element for routing security. So our goal here is to enhance the security and integrity of RPKI by doing 2 things. First is to build our members' trust and confidence that they're doing the right thing. And second, to ease compliance efforts should any new regulatory requirement arise. So the goal here is to develop and implement an internal control framework that contains all the important IT security elements, but also can be tailored towards specific RPKI needs. There are 5 areas covered in this control framework: security, availability, confidentiality, and processing integrity. and we have left privacy out because there is no personal information in RPKI. So as Hans-Peter just mentioned in his presentation, this was a huge undertaking involving the whole organization, not just your usual IT security controls, but also HR and facilities for things like security of the building, background screening for new staff, etc. So the goal here is to ensure that we have sufficient controls in place and that those controls are implemented to relevant policies and procedures. And there is also an audit trail that can be verified by a neutral third party, like by an auditor. So where we are on this process, we're actually in the middle of an audit. So EY is the auditor that we have selected. They started the audit last month, and I was really hoping to be here today and say that the audit is completed and this is the result. However, we still need a couple of weeks more. We have 76 controls being tested by UI, and the final report is expected over the next couple of weeks. And then this report can only be disclosed to members on request under an NDA. And then 1 year from now, we're planning to do the type 2 audit, which is more thorough than the type 1. Now, I think there's many people waiting for this part of my presentation about what they're doing to reduce costs, especially reducing our data center footprint. We have a relatively large data center footprint in the Relevance CC. So we have 46 racks spread across 2 different data centers in Amsterdam, and the cost for housing and power alone is just shy from 1 million euros per year. Half of that space is used for our internet measurement services, for Atlas, RIS, and STAT data sets. So the underlying technology is Hadoop cluster, and these are very large data sets. So you can think of petabytes worth of data, basically telling the history of the internet. So our goal here is to reduce that footprint by half before the end of this year, and by more than 70% by the end of 2025. And we want to achieve that while at the same time preserving all the historical data and maintaining the service levels. And I have also written a Labs article about it, so in case you're interested, I suggest to read. So this is the current situation in our data centers. I have 2 data centers, M3 and M5, 36 racks in M3, 10 racks in M5. And you might have guessed each square represents a rack. And I have color-coded them. So the red one is about network, so switches, routers, etc. The blue one is used by GII, so DNS, for example. Then the purple part is basically the Hadoop cluster, so that's used by RIS, STAT, and Atlas datasets. And then you have the yellow one that's used by IT, so that's RPKI, LR portal, RIPE database, and so on. So our goal here is to reduce that by half before the end of this year, and we are well on track of that. And by 78% by the end of next year. So going down from 46 down to 10 racks. Now, there is no magic here. We're not just reducing all this rack space, but there's some movement to the cloud. So there's an increased cloud cost, however, at a much reduced rate. So we'll explain a bit now how we're doing this. So it's mostly to the RIPE Atlas backend migration. So since last year, we have started migrating the RIPE Atlas datasets from our on-prem infrastructure to a hybrid solution that's composed by 2 parts. The first one is a smaller cluster that's built using rented bare metal from an European cloud provider. And that can be seen as a cache, if you will. And then for the historical data, we're planning to use AWS S3. So that's a cheap object storage from AWS. And this new solution only costs a fraction of the current one while maintaining the same service levels and also being future-proof, because one of our worries was about the data growth. So this chart basically says what I just explained. On the left side, no, on the right side, you have the hot storage. So that's the cache, if you will. It's built on rented bare metal. And then on the left side, you have the historical data that's in the object storage. We're using AWS S3, but it's also possible to use other options. And there is a lot of money saving part on the historical data. So there was a question yesterday on Robert's presentation about whether it's cheaper to go to the cloud or not. I think that depends a lot on the use case. In this specific case, it proved to be significantly cheaper to use AWS S3 as opposed to running this on-prem or to just have a bigger cluster using a rented bare metal. The cost of both solutions, like for the hot storage and the cold storage, are roughly the same, and we have budgeted for 100,000 euros per year, so to have an idea. And these parameters are all adjustable. So we could make a smaller cluster, for example, for the hot storage. We could change the tiering in AWS and so on. And then we can optimize for cost, performance, or find a good balance between both. Going through the migration timelines now, we have finalized the data extraction, so exporting the data from the old cluster into S3. We're currently migrating data sets from RIS and STAT into a different cluster. So it's in the Atlas cluster, moving to a different one. And you have also finalized building a new cluster using rented bare metal. And we very soon are going to start consuming data into this new cluster. So once you have sufficient data there, we can then switch over production to this new cluster and then start decommissioning the old one and removing the hardware from the data center. Now, that was basically my presentation for today. A couple of takeaways. The first one is that security is our top priority in technology, and our goal is to contribute to the stability of the internet. And second, cost effectiveness is our second priority, and we're aiming to have significant cost reductions by modernizing the infrastructure of our internet management services. And I now open the floor for questions.
Thanks, Philippe. Are there any questions?
There's more questions.
Oh, there's one on the Massimo's, which we'll take first.
Yeah, so there's a question from Maximilian Hennig, speaking for himself. Did you evaluate other S3 providers?
Sorry.
Did you evaluate other S3 providers?
We have an option with Cloudflare for the R2, but it proved to be more beneficial S3 for now, but we're still reconsidering that. It's possible that we might use R2 in the future.
I think Jim got there just ahead of Marco.
Jim Reed speaking for myself again. Very interesting presentation, and thank you for all those updates on what's going on. My question is about the use of the cloud service providers. Have you given any thoughts into exit strategies from these providers? I'm particularly concerned about the possibility that a cloud provider either goes bust or decides for some other reason that you can look at access to the data that you submitted to them. So do you have backups for some of this data? Do you have the ability to then recover that data in the event of something really bad happening that's not in the best interests of the NCC or the rights for their membership?
Yes, we all have concerns about all of these topics. We also think about if something goes wrong, that you can quickly redeploy in a different provider. So that's why we aim to use standards like Kubernetes, for example. So if you have something running on AWS and Kubernetes, it's very easy to move that to either on-premise, where you also have a cluster, but you could also use from OVH or from other providers.
Okay. What motivated this question for me is that it's not a comparable situation, but it does have similarities. Is that there's one case of an organization which is dependent on the database service, and it's impossible to move away from that database service because of the terms of conditions, and there's no possibility of migrating to another provider because the cost of trying to do that are far in excess of the cost of using the existing service they've got. So I just want to know that you've got some mechanisms that can be used in the event of something really bad happening. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're more worried about the legal aspects of it?
Well, not so much. Just playing devil's advocate for a moment. Just say your cloud provider says, I'm not playing ball anymore and you can't get your data from us ever again. Have a nice day. Then what?
Thank you.
think there would be a bigger problem then. Marco.
Marco Ditri from CWeb is strictly related. Did you calculate how much it would cost to take the historical data outside of S3?
We calculated how much it would cost to fix the current cluster, so keep it on premises, and it was basically double the price.
No, sorry, it's a different question. You will not have a local backup anymore of the historical data, is this correct? It will only be in S3?
For now, it's in S3, and we currently have also in the current cluster, so we didn't delete it yet. But yes, in the future, it will be only in S3.
Okay, and in that future, how much would it cost to take the data outside from S3 if it were needed for any random reason?
I mean, I don't have a number to give to you. However, I do believe that most of the effort will be from an engineering point of view. And I think we could reuse a lot of the scripts that we wrote to extract data from the current cluster into S3.
Sorry, this is not a technical question. This is a business question because taking that outside of S3 is extremely expensive.
Yes, now I see your point. We didn't calculate. We can follow up offline.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marco. Ben, and then.
Hi, Ben Medicine from Work Online. I think that you said, if I heard you correctly, that the access to the results of the RPKI audit were available under NDA to members. Is that correct, or is it subject to NDA for whoever's interested in seeing that data and is willing to enter into the NDA?
To the best of my knowledge, it's just for members. And
Okay.
you have to make a request and then sign an NDA.
I would
something we're just going to have published online.
I'd suggest that that's a much wider audience that has a legitimate interest in seeing the results of that audit. The group of people that are relying on you to operate that infrastructure in a secure fashion is much broader than the NCC's membership. I'd encourage you to rethink that.
So Hans-Peter Holen, Managing Director, thanks for that feedback. We will definitely take that into consideration. We also have on our roadmap a SOC 3 report or a Type 3 report, which will be available to everybody. The reason that we want to be limiting distribution of the SOC 2 report is, as you know, SOC 2 reports includes all technical details of all vulnerabilities currently. So that can be a security risk in itself to share that. Now, hopefully we don't have any of those. So then it's a clean report, so it's not a problem, but it's not something that the provider automatically will pass out. We're also aiming for an ISO 27001 where the certificate will be available. But you know, being part of the supply chain of vendors that have compliance requirements, that puts us in this situation, and they are our members or customers. But yeah, you know, ideally this should be public, but that has consequences. So yeah.
So to be clear, I'm not for a second suggesting that you stick it on the website. I think that whatever mechanisms you see fit to put in place to ensure that it's going to remain confidential are completely legitimate. I just don't think that an arbitrary restriction that it has to be the member base is appropriate.
Thanks, Ben.
Peter Hessler from Zayo, speaking for myself. I want to strongly echo what Marco was saying earlier about the cost of leaving S3. There's been a number of relatively famous cases where it was, cents to add your data, but millions to take it out, and it could bankrupt organizations by trying to leave the service. And I have to say, frankly, I'm disappointed that you haven't looked at this and considered it, because this is something that we have brought to the NCC when the entire cloud discussion started. So it's a little frustrating that that part was ignored when that was a big concern for a lot of us, because that could be the entire budget for the year.
Yeah, no, thanks for your feedback. And I do understand there's the whole egress costs from S3, and I'll get the numbers.
Okay, two more comments, questions. Gagana first.
Yeah, so it's from remote participant Randy Bush, IIJ Research. Why is the RPKI audit NDA at all?
Because the format of this audit report, maybe Hans-Peter wants to say more about it. It's not something you can just disclose because it includes a lot of security information.
So Hans-Peter Holen, Managing Director, RIPE NCC again. Hi, Randy. As I tried to say, a SOC 2 report lists all the controls that we have in place and whether they have been effective or not. So if that report says that we had this control in place and the control was not effective, that's demonstrating a vulnerability that can be used to attack us. Now, ideally, there will be no deviations or no such finding. I mean, that's our goal, right? And then we could theoretically make it public. I would love to do that, but I can't promise to do that.
Thanks, Professor. Right, finally, Ben.
Hi, Ben, BG Petals. I feel like it's important to tell everybody else and I'm not advocating for cloud migrations here, but the 5th of March, Amazon announced that if you basically are saying that you're permanently leaving Amazon, then they will waive egress fees to leave. So it's a sort of a slightly moot point, but that's only Amazon, I believe. So.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
Thanks. So that wasn't the last question. We've got two more on Massimo's and the last question on the floor after that. Oh, sorry, one. Oh, he's coming live.
Hello, hi. So I would like to address two of the questions that have been asked before. My name is Razvan. I'm the IT engineering manager in the RIPE NCC. I have been deeply involved in this, of course, data center migrations and some of these movements. To the question regarding whether we looked at other S3 providers as an industry standard, yes. We chose AWS S3 this time because of previous experience with its performance. We had tests done before. We had existing pipelines for deployment. We do infrastructure as code, and also the security controls that we have integrated in the landing zone with the security tools that we use internally. So that was also due to the urgency of the entire project. That was the decision being taken and the financials checked out. That being said, as Felipe mentioned, we are constantly looking at and comparing other options, and we'll consider them as soon as all these integrations have the time to test them and see what would make sense in the future. This was on the AWS S3. On the egress, it is indeed what has been said previously. In case you decide to leave the cloud AWS entirely, the egress fees are being waived. So that also gives a bit of insurance that you do not run bills into millions as mentioned. Thank you.
Thanks, Razvan, for that clarification. Right, final comment.
So Tobias Siewich, Max Planck Institute for Informatics, and also sometimes a little bit of a security researcher. I would like to remind everyone of the Kirchhoff's principle in cryptography. And I would like to note that given our large membership, I would not be surprised if a document obtained under NDA stored at one member might become ultimately public due to a misconfiguration, an oversight, or a simple human error. So given Kirchhoff's principle, I would argue that deciding to publish it from the beginning is just anticipating an incident which will ultimately happen if it can be obtained by members.
Yeah, thanks, Tobias.
Thank you. Okay, that's all the questions we have for you, Philippe. So thank you.
Thank you.